All right, welcome to Life Giving Leaders. Welcome, welcome. As you may already know, I'm Michael. This is Dana. We are your hosts and co-founders of Hannah Strategy, as well as Life Giving Leaders. Yes, we are husband and wife. And so welcome, welcome. It's so good to see you. Shout out to all the members that are joining in the Zoom room. Feel free to ask your questions, put your comments in the Zoom room, because after this 30-minute live stream, we are going to get into our members-only discussion, and we are going to talk about it, and we are going to put it into practice. So today in Life Giving Leaders, we are talking about your leadership superpowers, but not just about the fact that we have them, where they come from, and often the thing that makes you uniquely effective as a leader is rooted in some of your deepest pains. And so when we think about our story, when I think about my story, I like to think about the successes. I like to think about the good stuff. I like to think about the things I'm proud of, my wins, the times I persevered, the times I accomplished something special. And I should think about that. And I should celebrate that. But what I don't want to do is bypass the pain, the disappointments, even the times I've disappointed myself. When I think about those areas of my life, we tend to want to kind of shove them under the rug, right? And not pay a lot of attention to them. Why? Because they hurt. They're not fun. They're not pleasant. However, if I lean into it, I can leverage it. And we'll talk about what that specifically means and what that many ways that can look like. But the point is, your pain is part of your story. The experiences that you have had have shaped who you are, not just who you are, uniquely who you are, not just uniquely who you are, but how you bring value to the world around you, your life-giving leadership. So this is what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And when we use the word superpowers, while I was listening to you talk, I do want to make a distinction. So there is superpowers that we get by overcoming challenges, and then we become experts in that area because we've defeated it and we've found a way and we've found a system and we can help others out of that darkness. Like there is Psalm 23 is one that so many people just love it off the bat, and I did. But when I started getting really closer to God, I actually struggled a little bit with this psalm, because there's this one line in this psalm which talks about when we're following Jesus, though he leads us through the valley of the shadow of death. And we need to take the Bible as a real document. So I would kind of look at that and say, well, if I'm following you, why are you leading me through the valley of the shadow of death? Like that sounds very contradictory. And I kind of came to the realization that this was kind of this is the analogy that I got. The analogy that I got is very, very practical. If you are in your own home and you need to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you don't need to turn on the lights. You can get there easy. Why? You've been there before. You know the way out. Even in the darkness, you can make it through. If you've been somewhere dark, if you've been through the valley of the shadow of death, if you've found your way out as a leader now, you can go in and lead other people out. So that is the superpower we're touching on today. There's another set of superpowers that is talked about when talked about the motivational gifts, which Evelyn Silvoso does with such brilliance. And that's superpowers that are given to you as a result of your design. Now, the things we go through and the superpowers we get through struggle can actually be related to our original design. But we're talking about the superpowers we get after defeating a challenge, a struggle.
Now, some of you are maybe listening to this and you're saying, well, what if I haven't defeated it? What if I'm still struggling with it? What if it still hurts? What if I haven't forgiven the person? What if it's something that happened to me and I had no control? What does it even mean to defeat it? It happened. And so how do you actually convert a pain into a superpower? How do you actually be intentional about it? What does that look like? And we're actually going to tap into maybe a couple of things that we've talked about in previous episodes of Life Giving Leadership, because Your story is made up of everything that already happened so far, and what's happening now, and what's going to happen. Okay. But the only part you know so far is what has happened,
Yeah.
right? And so if you're going to love your story, I want to say that again. If you're going to love your story, your whole story, then how we think about it matters. So if I'm facing my past, I'm not going to effectively walk forward. I'm facing
That's
my
right.
past.
That's right.
Now, so what do I mean by facing my past? What are the things that keep me facing my past? Resentment,
Yeah.
bitterness, unforgiveness, shame, disappointment, disappointment in self, regret, I guess would be the word there. These are all things that keep me anchored backwards. And what I want to do is I want to cut those anchors. I want to cut the chains attaching me to those anchors, and I want to reattach myself to God and to my future and to my present and to my present. And so what'll happen is if I haven't processed the thing and received the healing for it, then what's going to happen is it's going to limit how I make decisions. It's going to limit how I operate. It's going to limit the extent of my creativity. And so one of the ways is to break free of the past. And another way is actually how we think about our story. This is my point here. Those challenges that you faced, a lot of times it's natural for us to think about those challenges as disadvantages.
Right.
A disadvantage. I grew up in a neighborhood where there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. I felt like I was disadvantaged. I have certain aspects about my career that I admired others that weren't true about mine. Maybe I'll talk about that later in this conversation. I felt like it was a disadvantage. But when I started to reframe how I look at those situations, I realized, wait a minute, I can really leverage those experiences and actually turn them into super advantages. And now I do it actually very intentionally. So I'll give you an example. Okay. This is just a very simple example. In my career, I'm in high growth technology revenue operations. And so I've had a lot of short stints because I'm in high risk, big bet environments. So I've had a lot of short stints, 2 years or less. And I would look at that and I would feel a little embarrassed about it. I'd be like, oh man, I wish I could be like this person over here who had a 10, 12 year experience at this company, or this other person over here who's got promoted 5 times in this one particular organization, But I had all of these short stints, and I used to be embarrassed and try not to talk about it too much. And I know it's there; it's on my LinkedIn profile. I'll answer questions reactively if need be, that kind of a thing. But then I started to realize, as we started our coaching, as we've gotten into more consulting, I realized actually it's the variety of experiences that I've had at different stages of growth in an organization, the variety of experiences that I've had in different sales and marketing models, in different types of organizational cultures. It's exactly that variety that gives me my unique value proposition, where I can rapidly enter into any situation and discern what decision will lead to what risks in the future, quickly discern what needs to happen. And now I actually lean into that experience. And I love that about my career so far. I love the variety that I've experienced.
So you talked about how you see your story. And we've talked in previous episodes about learning to love your past self, learning to love your story, and disconnecting from the past. And the importance of disconnecting from the past is owning all of who you are, but it's also being able to be completely present in the moment, because this is the moment you have power. You cannot change the past, but you can use it for power in the present, to change the present, to make it better. They call this in cognitive behavioral therapy, they call it radical acceptance. Okay, this has happened. I don't like it, but it happened. I'm here now. What am I going to do now? I have power over this moment. And in terms of accepting the past, so you mentioned forgiveness, you mentioned overcoming resentment. So that can be in terms of other people, but also in terms of yourself. Sometimes we look at our younger self, and we've talked about this before, And we say, oh, if I hadn't made that decision, I'd be in such a better place right now. And as long as you're doing that, you're actually keeping yourself captive to the disadvantage of that position instead of tapping into the superpower. You know, if you can forgive yourself, if you can look at that younger self and go, I know why you did that. That made sense. You made that out of a good heart. Might have been the wrong decision, but we're going to own that and use that as a superpower now, because now I've learned and I can help so many other people. You know, we can take one mistake we've made or one trauma that we've gone through, and then help countless amounts of people because we've learned how to get to the other side. But I think what's key here is it's not just because you went through something, now you have the superpower. What did you do with that something that you went through?
Yeah.
Did you process it? Did you get to the other side? Did you get better as opposed to bitter, like they say, you know?
Yeah. I think about the concept of sympathy and empathy and compassion, right? So sympathy is, I feel for you. I feel for you. I care. I feel for you that you're going through that. Empathy is, I feel with you. And compassion is, therefore, I'm going to help you. I'm going to get involved. I'm going to do something about it.
Right.
Now, when we go through something, that equips us to go beyond sympathy, which is good, to empathy, which is very good. And so, because I can feel with you, why? Because I've been through it.
Right.
This is why, when we think about our Christian faith, and I think about, all the things that Jesus went through, I can't find any challenge in my life that I go through that he hasn't experienced, that he can't relate, where he can't say, I feel you, bro. So I want to be able to say, I feel with you. And so it enables me as a leader to identify different situations. Now, what I'm not saying is that it is impossible to empathize with someone if you haven't gone through the same thing.
Right.
There are lots of ways to translate and relate and all of that. But the point is, it becomes more natural. I'll give you an example, with mental health. When I had struggled with mental health, I heard about all mental health struggles. It's a thing. I knew it. I heard about it. Okay, I'll pray for you. I respect what you're going through and all that. But until I went through it myself, now I come out the other side and I'm like, oh man, this is a thing. Like, this is properly like I understand the implications. I understand what it means from a day-to-day standpoint. So now, if I see someone, if there's somebody around me, if there's somebody who reports to me, if there's a team member, if there's a family member, a friend who's struggling with anything by which I can relate to it, I'm not going to project my experience onto them. But there's something that's going on in here whereby there's a love, there's a compassion, there's a point of connection that really, really affects how I go about leading them, and how I go about creating a safe space for them, how I go about empowering them, or maybe even challenging them if needed.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you really do listen to someone and they know you've heard them because you've been through it, and you can almost finish or describe to them how they're feeling, or describe something to them, an aspect of what they're going through that they didn't tell you because you've been there. The amount of connection or the power of the story, like we hear so often the power of the story, that really, like, even in an environment like this, if we're sharing personal stories, and it even has a biological effect of releasing oxytocin and causing that connection whereby you can really get join with that person and take them through. And that's what we love to do. We love to journey with our clients and take the journey with our clients to the other side, to that place of life-giving leadership, to that place of freedom in so many different areas. And it's such a lifelong process. I think this conversation actually came out of a conversation we were having the other day about certain Bible characters. And we were talking about Esther and Joseph and Daniel. And these are actually three characters that were highlighted together to me initially from Dr. Ed Silvoso, who's running the Ecclesia Accelerator Part 1 and 2, amazing courses. But just we were looking at them, and we were looking at the aspect in our conversation the other day, yesterday, of the fact that they had the most tragic origin story. So they're the only people recorded that were able to save, positively transform entire nations in the biblical account, entire nations in their time in history. And actually in Joseph's case, many nations, because he saved, it was a world economic crisis in that time. And they had the most tragic of backstories. Like Esther was an orphan, she had to be raised by her cousin, then she got drafted into this thing where she might have to, marry a foreign king. We don't actually know that she wanted to be a part of that.
Right.
That might have just been not a choice for her. But she ended up saving the entire nation of her people at a time when they would have faced genocide. The other one was Joseph, which was, his brothers rejected him. They were jealous of him. They threw him into a pit. He went into slavery. He was then falsely imprisoned. But then through all these events, he ended up rising to a place in power. He was second in command, not first, but he was given all the authority and was able to help not just one nation, but all the surrounding nations in a time of famine and starvation, of economic crisis. And with Daniel, he was taken from his people and he was castrated, and he was also able to be a very influential source to a nation through many, many different kings. Now, why do I say this? This is why I say this. So many of us, and us, like our community, like you guys, you are like us. Like you are leaders, and you just want to make more and more positive impact in the world. And we just want to see more and more transformation and incredible things. But nobody really, I don't say nobody, but we don't generally enjoy suffering or invite suffering. Usually if suffering is in the picture, we just want it out of the picture. We don't generally, unless we understand that there's a purpose to it. And even sometimes if we do, it can be hard to lean into that, to say like, this is where the superpowers I need to do all the things that I desire in my heart come from. And it's just very interesting to see, like, it would have been impossible for them to do what they did and be who they were and be such huge influences on huge spheres without those tragic origin stories. So if you have that origin story, I do definitely have, but do not let that count yourself out. It actually counts you in.
There you go.
If you do the work. I want to be like, it's not just, you have to do the work.
100%, man. It's interesting when you think about those examples of Esther and Daniel and Joseph and even David. In all of those instances, there was something that isolated them.
Yes.
Either they were rejected in their early years, or something circumstantially pulled them out of their place of familiarity into a place of loneliness, into a place of isolation. There seems to be something about isolation in an origin story that is an accelerant toward destiny. I also want to clarify that we talk about these leadership superpowers, right? Empathy isn't just the only form of that. There are lots of different ways it can lead into a superpower. So example, Moses. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace. He grew up as royalty, even though he wasn't blood related to Pharaoh. And later on, he came to kind of resent that happened. He saw the slavery that was happening to his people, and he realized, oh, shoot, I've been a part of something that I'm not proud of. Well, but then it was those very connections that he built in Pharaoh's palace that he needed to leverage when he had to go and deliver the Israelites. Not anybody could just get access to the palace to go and say, let my people go, right? So he actually had those open doors. He had those connections rooted in his origin story. And so it's not just a sense of empathy. That is one really, really strong example of a leadership superpower that can come out of pain. But there are lots of different forms that can look like. So
right. I do want to, there's a caveat here. So a lot of times there's been isolation maybe in the origin story, but in order to actually like cross the finish line and to be the leader that you're called to be, and it's important to be in community. And in community with the right people, with the like-minded people. And I think sometimes when we have had those origin stories of a transformational leader, because of a season of isolation somewhere in our past, or maybe you're going through something now, we have to actually lean in to the like, no, I need community. Like it is okay, so let me talk about, in the Roman Empire, there was this idea of ecclesia. And what ecclesia was if there was 2 or 3 people gathered together who were like of nobility, and they agreed upon something, that something became law, that something was done. There was such a power in their agreement. In that way, it made a legal agreement. And Jesus actually uses this word ecclesia. We've translated it as church now, but that's not the complete picture. But he uses this word as ecclesia to say when 2 or 3 like-minded leaders on the same page with bringing good, positive change into the earth come together. The manifest presence of Jesus is there, the presence that can make that happen, the presence that can bring transformation. So in hearing like that isolation is part of maybe your origin story as the great leader that you are right now, or that you are right now, even if you aren't walking in it yet, we need to not stay there.
That's big.
We need to make, and even with the leaders we talked about, we did talk about how, with Moses, there was Jethro and his wife, and then Aaron and Miriam with, with Joseph, there was his wife, and there was always somebody.
David and Jonathan.
Yeah, David and Jonathan, what some would call, like just that partner to do those things with, that can bring that agreement, that power. And even we've seen so much now, it is in business and in just on the world stage, it is such a time of collaboration to get things done.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. In fact, even just from a business strategy standpoint,
absolutely,
there's a lot of dialogue right now and action around businesses, not just focusing on the direct customer to company relationship, but really being intentional about building out their ecosystems, connecting clients with other clients, connecting partners with clients, and just really building that ecosystem and sense of community is actually a really foundational strategy in both business to business and business to consumer, in both B2B and B2C scenarios. So really, really big about community. Community isn't just about one to many. Don't picture yourself with several hundreds and say that has to be community. It's the examples you use were just a few really important relationships at the same time as well. Just a few really important connections to walk together.
And I was meditating on this actually this morning. The aspect of like, even when, for those of you who've taken our course, Defining Your Next Chapter with Clarity and Confidence, there's one section that we talk about the rhythms in your life and the ecosystems in your life.
Yes.
In terms of the relationships and that you nurture them and all of those different things. And, those relationships that are healthy, that feed you, that you are able to feed into, and they are receiving, and there isn't toxicity, how you kind of pull them. And this is kind of a visual we got from Danny Silk. You pull them into that closest circle around you. And then the one, the more you have to be careful, or the more that a relationship might drain you, the further out the circle it belongs in. And I was thinking about this from the aspect of, so first of all, a caveat on this, no matter what circle someone's in, love, forgiveness, and no resentment towards them, even for any toxicity you've experienced from them, has to be the stance of your heart. So you're not, because it doesn't matter how far the circle is, if you are still carrying that, then you're still experiencing all the consequences from what they did unnecessarily. So doing that all in love, but just building proper structures so that we can be the best for, and create the best rhythms and create the ecosystem that builds us so we can have the furthest impact on the most people in the world. And even in terms of businesses now, like we are seeing like, oh, you're like-minded like us, or you have the same heart, or we are not in competition. We are on the same page because we are building towards the same thing and really just creating that system of working together. And we can do so much more. You can do so much more in partnership with the right people. And you really need to not see people as competition, but learn to see people in your same space with the same mindset as allies, when that's what they are.
Yeah, right on. Some of you may be listening to this conversation and thinking, this is all great, but it's a lot easier said than done.
Right.
Or guys, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know how stuck I feel or how stuck maybe I am. If that's how you're feeling, let's talk about it. In the description for this video, there's a link for Let's Chat. And we're here to hear more if you want to share a little bit more. But I'm telling you that in every single such conversation we've had, it turns out you're not as stuck as you think you are. You're not as stuck as it feels. Legitimate reasons why you feel that way. But there are ways to reframe how we're thinking about our experiences, about our circumstances, about what's going on in here that really, really can bring you to a next level of liberty and a broader set of available decisions and options in your life. So we have a whole program that can walk you through that. But if you feel stuck, if you feel disempowered, let's have a conversation about it. Don't stop there. I want to invite you guys to take this conversation before we go into the membership room, before we close the live stream, and ask yourself, pause right now and just think about your story. And think about, is there anything in your story that you feel gives you a disadvantage? It may be an incident, it may be part of how you're designed, it may be something else, but is there anything in your story so far that you have felt it puts you at a disadvantage in life? Pause now and think about, identify that. Now I want to challenge you with a question. When you think about that perceived disadvantage, what are all of the possible ways that it might be an advantage? Or maybe even has been an advantage. What are the things in your design, in your understanding, in your experience, maybe things that you've had to develop in how you operate to compensate for certain challenges? But what are the things that are now true about you and how you operate and how you think that would never have been true that actually put you at a position of advantage? How can you intentionally become thankful for that part of your story and leverage it to give yourself a super advantage? Think about it now, but maybe even think about it through the week as well, and just write as you have ideas. And I pray, our prayer for you is that God will open your eyes to see the beauty and the power of that part of your story.
Now, if you're doing that exercise and you can't see where it's been an advantage and you can't see how it's an advantage and it still hurts, almost like it first did, now this is something you haven't processed and you have to process. And there are many ways to process it, to change the neural pathways, and just to really put an end to that in your life. And that's something we walk alongside. We walk alongside you to do that. We walk alongside you in your successful leadership to bring you further. And, we're here to really lift up your hands and to really do this together, because that's what we're doing with so many of you. And, but if you do find that thing and you're like, I don't see any benefit, I'm still bitter, then now this is something you need to process and come to the other side of.
Right on. So I just want to close by restating even the title of this conversation. Your leadership superpowers are hidden in your greatest and your deepest pain. Now we're going to go into the membership room. By the way, if you're curious about becoming a member, you can absolutely do so. Simply click on this other link. There are 2 links in the description, and one of them gives you a little bit more information about membership. So members, we are going to now join you in the Zoom room, and live streamers, we will see you next Wednesday at the same time.